Guess it doesn't really take all that long to get a hang of those rings. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 25th film in the MCU, Marvel's 2021 superhero action movie, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings stars Simu, Awkwafina, and Leung, and was directed by Destin Cretton. It tells the origin story of Shang-Chi, played by Simu, who must confront his past in order to protect those he loves from the Ten Rings organization. I'll be honest, going into this movie, the hype just wasn't there for me. The marketing for this film has certainly been lackluster, but it's also just a personal thing for me with these movies. As much as I always seem to enjoy them, I just don't tend to get super excited about upcoming comic book movies. This is especially the case when we're dealing with a character that I don't know anything about. Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, all movies that I enjoyed to varying degrees, but also all movies that I had zero anticipation for. Even with its enjoyable enough trailer, Shang-Chi was no different for me in terms of anticipation, because I didn't know anything about him. For these intro movies, it always comes down to the movie itself for me. And let's just say, this is one of the best new character introductions we've had from the MCU in a long time. As somebody completely new to this character, I was so impressed and relieved by how everything was presented here. The backstory for this film literally encompasses thousands of years, and even just the main character's history goes back 2 decades, so there's a lot of information given to us. Not only is there some rich world building to establish the fantastical myth and legend elements of the story, but a lot of setup for the central family in order to explain why the characters are the way they are. Really, it's a ton of information, delivered on top of the present-day story and plot of the film. But it was remarkably easy to follow, and I gotta say, I never felt bogged down by it. And a big part of the reasoning for that was how it was delivered. It's revealed in small increments over the course of the film. Not in a secretive way that feels like it's withholding information, but rather just in a way that made sense, giving us relevant backstory at precisely the right moments. The general story of this film, as it relates to its present-day elements, is pretty solid. Plot-wise, it's nothing extraordinary. We're talking about mythical powers and hidden villages and evil secret organizations, so pretty standard legend fantasy stuff. But really what makes the story work is the family component. Shang-Chi and his sister have issues. Shang-Chi and his father have other issues. His father and his sister have their own issues. Everybody's resentful and in emotional pain for different reasons. But even through all of their issues, not to mention some big evil schemes, they never lose sight of that sense of family, and neither do we. It's a story about legacy. Not of power like Wenwu thinks, but of connection and family legacy. And that's something I don't think we've yet seen more strongly presented in the MCU. This family-centric strength hinges on the performances, and I was extremely impressed across the board. Simu plays our title character, and he has this really effortless everyman quality to him. That's something that's been attempted with a few other MCU characters in the past. Spider-Man, Ant-Man, all the arthropod men, but it just feels so much more natural here. For the most part, he doesn't really feel like a comic book character, even after we realize he's not quite the everyman we thought he was. Although not actually part of the central family, Awkwafina's Katie and her friendship with Shang-Chi are great. Once again, I'm surprised by how much I enjoyed her humor here. I think she might be growing on me. The core family is rounded out by Leung and Zhang as Shang-Chi's father and sister, which both bring something different but equally strong to the table, giving further weight to the family elements of the story. The story here was good, but the action was great. There were some fun car chases and spectacle scenes, but it's the fight sequences that elevate the action here. We do occasionally see the 10 rings in action, and those scenes are fairly cool, but the straight up hand-to-hand combat is definitely the highlight here. I'll admit that I'm not much of a wuxia fan, so when I saw elements of that early on in the film, I was a little concerned. The floating, dancing flow of that style is done beautifully, but it's not my thing. Luckily, most of the martial arts action here is much more fast-paced and grounded. There are several great fight sequences here. We got a taste of the bus fight in the trailer, but there's another excellent one on some scaffolding. In each of these fights, the action is so fluid, using their often cramped environments to great effect. They're exciting and dynamically filmed, with the camera moving as effortlessly as the characters. There's a lot to love in this film, but it's not without its issues, and most of the problems that I have with it come during the third act. We get some more great world building when the characters arrive at a new location, and although things suddenly take an exceptionally fantastical and CG heavy turn, I was still on board with it because I was invested in the characters. The problem is that this third act just drags on, falling into the same big final fight trap that so many other comic book movies do. We've got the main character conflict, but then there's endless filler battling going on in the background. And this film goes an extra step by adding an additional concurrent battle during the finale that almost draws attention away from the characters we should be focusing on. It's a nice spectacle, but becomes a swirling CGI fest at a far grander physical scale than anticipated. It's not bad, but the third act tries to do too many things and ends up making the film longer than it optimally should have been. In spite of my issues with the third act, I was still very pleasantly surprised by this movie. Strong characters, performances, and action help to elevate this film beyond its familiar core MCU structure. This feels like an exciting beginning. Although Black Widow was technically the first film of Phase 4, it was set during Phase 3, so Shang-Chi feels like a more fitting and proper kickoff to the Phases films. Like all MCU movies at this point, it harks back to a handful of previous movies and characters, but it also establishes new characters that I can't wait to see again. Here's hoping the MCU continues to stay in the pocket. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is definitely the action, specifically the fight choreography. The big spectacle fantasy action is fun, as are all of the car chases, but for me, the best parts were the fights. It's an MCU movie, but it's also very much a martial arts movie, with quite a bit of variety. If you like wuxia and flowing Tai Chi inspired moves, there are gonna be a lot of things you like about it. But if you like faster paced, harder hitting fighting styles, this also has plenty to please. The fights themselves are really well choreographed, but they're made even more impressive by the way they're filmed, utilizing their environments to the fullest and also continually, but fluidly, moving the camera. The second pro has gotta be the performances. I'll be honest, this isn't usually one of the highlights of an MCU movie for me. Not that I ever think the performances are bad, they just rarely stand out as great. Usually I'm more focused on the characters or elements of the story, but the whole ensemble for this movie just brings it. Of the main group here, I'm most familiar with Awkwafina, though I've also seen Tony Leung in a lot of Wong Kar-wai films, but I thought everybody was great here. I was especially impressed with Simu, who was able to just as believably play the part of Sean the valet as he did Shang-Chi, the trained assassin-turned-hero. On the con side, my only major issue is the third act. I actually thought it had some really good components. The prominence of the fantasy elements was a little unexpected after the rest of the film, but I thought it all worked given the location and everything that entailed. What didn't work for me was how much was crammed into the third act. And honestly, that too was surprising, because it seemed like it was building towards a pretty straightforward conflict. But then it just kept building, and kept building, and kept building. And finally, it reaches the expected conflict. But then there are all these other elements that suddenly come into play, and it just drags things out longer than it should have. It was still fun and compelling because of the characters, but I was really starting to feel the film's length at that point. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings 4 out of 5 paws. This was a really solid origin story and introduction to the character of Shang-Chi with an interesting plot, great performances, and some excellent action. I would recommend Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings to anybody who's a fan of comic book movies. Existing MCU fans are sure to enjoy this movie, but people who like martial arts movies will also find plenty to like here too. This movie does a really good job of setting up the story and explaining the character's history. So if you're a little hesitant because you don't know anything about Shang-Chi, don't worry. It's easy to follow and he's a great character. If you liked Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, I would recommend Raya and the Last Dragon. There's the obvious Awkwafina connection and quite a bit of legend fantasy overlap, but it also features a hero that follows a similar path and has some excellent, albeit animated, fight choreography. If you'd prefer to stick with the MCU, you might want to watch Iron Man 3. Not only does the main character have to grapple with the emotional consequences of their past, but there's also an unexpected and kind of surprising character connection too, that I'm not going to spoil. If you want another movie steeped in family tradition and legacy, you should check out The Farewell. It certainly doesn't have the action of a superhero movie, but it does have an exceptionally strong and impactful family core. Plus, it's another movie starring Awkwafina. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite superhero origin story movie? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.